Welcome to Passive Aggressive Income. This program may contain strong language. The content may not be suitable for audiences under the age of 17. We understand many of our listeners may not agree with all of our personal viewpoints. We in no way, shape, or form mean to be offensive to anyone. Our show notes will provide all of our source material included for each episode. Now let's get passive aggressive.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Passive Aggressive Income. We're your hosts, Lexi and Mims. Last week we talked about querying, and if you haven't listened to that one or you don't know what querying is, go listen to that one first before listening to this one because Mims is going to continue the conversation on um all of the things having to do when you're writing your own book. So take it away,
Yeah.
Mims.
Sounds good. Yeah, so like Lexi said, last week I talked about how to query, and now I'm going to talk about where to query your manuscript. So if you are ready to submit your manuscript to an agent for representation, or go through, there's multiple ways to do it. So you can go through the agency website. Let's say you are like, I need to be published by Random House or something like that. So they have their own ways to submit. But the way I've been doing it mostly is a really cool website called Query Tracker. So I'll talk about that first. Query Tracker, you will create an account because it will track your submissions and communication with any agents you have started that line of communication with and queried with. And then you can also search by name or search by genre, which to me is the best way to find an agent that would better suit you, just because I don't know any agents by name. So I'm going to go with genres because that is pretty self explanatory.
Mhm.
And then make sure you add all of the genres your manuscript can fall into. For example, I search for fiction, erotica, fantasy, and romance so that I can see everybody that's in those fields, if you want to say it like that.
Mhm.
Okay, then there are all the agents looking for these types of genres, and you can submit your manuscript in that way, in the way that they're looking for submissions. So some have forms for you to complete right on Query Tracker, and then sometimes they specifically ask for it to be emailed, or if they're really old school, they prefer it to be physically mailed to them, which is rare, but it still happens.
Mhm. How do you feel
So
about that? Do you think that's like, oh, like these guys have been doing it this way for so long, like they're gonna be really good? Or are you more on the end of like, oh, like they haven't changed anything in all these years, like maybe I should go with someone else?
depends on their reputation. Like
Mhm.
if they're really well known and they have published really good works and
Mhm.
really good books, then I'd be like, okay, I'll jump through extra hoops for you.
Yeah.
But if it's just like some crotchety, like, just doesn't want to change their ways type of agent, then I'm like, but you can definitely, and what I'm going to say is you definitely need to research who
Mm.
you're querying beforehand. So if you do see that they are, male only, but you see that they've discovered Sarah J. Moss, and you're like, oh, that is amazing. That is a great agent to have on my side because
Mhm.
if Sarah J. Moss is this well known, what could he do for me or she or whatever?
Right.
So it depends.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like I mean, what it sounds like and what I can compare it to my own personal life is like applying for jobs and how you kind of have
Mhm.
to tailor each resume to like that specific job. It sounds like very similar with querying an agent.
Yeah, it really is. So, what do you need when you are submitting your manuscript? Last week, we talked about how to construct your query letter. So, I'm going to go over other things that you're going to need, which is, of course, your query letter. And if you want more details, go back to the last episode. You also need your synopsis. So, that's a brief 1 page breakdown of your manuscript, including plot twists and spoilers. And I do have mine if you
Ooh.
guys want to hear an example right off the bat.
Are you gonna give us like the whole like plot twist and spoilers and
Oh,
everything.
you're right. Never mind.
I was like, oh man, like doing this, it's gonna happen. I mean, I'm
It's
excited, but
not gonna
also,
happen. My bad. I'm sorry to have lied to everybody. I'm not gonna do
ouch.
it.
Well, I'm glad I said something because I
Yes.
think it'll be better when we actually read the full book itself than getting the little synopsis now.
Yes, you're right. You're right. So you're also going to want to have to sit down with yourself and think about who your potential targets are. Like I mentioned before, you're going to want to think about who is this directed to? Is it for middle school kids? Is it for young adults? Is it for professors? Just figure out who your targets are and make sure that it's clear. And then books that are similar to yours, make sure that they are um, not multi mega bestsellers, but they're still well known, and that they're relatively newer. And it shouldn't be like Pride and Prejudice because that's kind of like an older classic. We want things that are selling right now that is fitting into what people are reading right now.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
And then your quick pitch. We talked about that the last episode, so make sure to go and listen to that because it needs to be a one-liner. It could be, it's really hard to do, so make sure that you practice this with a friend, maybe just to make sure that it makes sense. I practiced with my husband. I'm like, does this sound good? Make sure that um, it I guess just it's understandable. And then sometimes they do ask for you to submit the first 3 to 4 chapters or the first 10 pages, just depending on who they are. And then sometimes they actually ask you to submit your whole manuscript. So it really just depends on who the agent is. And then sometimes they will ask you unrelated questions just to get to know you. These questions in no way affect your submission. It just gives them an insight on who you are. It's a rare thing, but sometimes these types of questions are built into the submission form. I remember one agent was like, if you were on a desert island, what are like the 5 movies that you would pick to, have forever? And you just random like things just to get to know you.
Right.
It's really rare, but it has happened.
I feel like that would make me feel even more pressure to answer those questions and like the things related to my book would be like, they're gonna judge me so hard. What if I say the wrong movies?
Right, right. I'm just like, you know what? If you want to judge me on Pulp Fiction, go for it.
Hey, it's a classic.
It is. So how long does it take for you to get a response? This is not a linear answer. I submitted a query submission in April and I didn't hear back until June.
Wow.
And it depends. Then I submitted my query last week and just heard back a few days after. So it just really depends on their workload and submission load. And it also depends on how much thought they put into rejecting or accepting your submission. So like all of the responses that I've gotten so far are rejections, but you
Mm.
could tell what is just a blanket, this isn't a good fit for me, and
Right.
then what has taken 2 3 months to reply with a pretty lengthy reply saying, this is not it for me right now, but here's A, B, and C on why. And a lot of them don't give you a why, which is kind of like, shitty on our end, but
Right.
it really depends on the agent.
hmm Yeah, I feel like I would really want some feedback. Like, is it something that it's about me or about like the book itself, or is it not a good
Yeah.
fit, or is it something that you're not liking about it? Like, give me some feedback here because that's
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot, especially when you're receiving those over and over. That's tough.
Exactly. I'm like, what can I do better? Because sometimes it's just, this isn't a good fit. And then I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, well, that's doesn't give me a lot of insight. And then
Yeah.
sometimes it's like this in my career at this point, I am not pursuing this. But if
Mhm.
it were like 15 years ago, maybe I would have, or, um, just different things really that have been told to me. So just to humanize myself for a second, I have been probably rejected 10 times so far, and I haven't heard back from 20 agents.
Oh my gosh.
So it's really like a nail biting experience because you're putting yourself out there, and then a no is better, honestly, than silence because
Yeah, for sure.
there's some agents that I'm like, I'm still waiting to hear from you, and I don't know when it's gonna strike. So
Right. Like there's still hope out there. What's
yeah.
gonna happen? Just very anxiety inducing. You are very tough for dealing with that.
I'm on the verge of a mental breakdown every day, so I don't know if I'm tough or not.
Surviving.
Um,
You're a survivor.
yes, I agree. So, how many times should I submit my manuscript? When I went to the convention that I was just in Milwaukee, they advised all of us to submit to at least 5 new agents each week. And then after every week's submissions, make sure to review your documents so that you can catch any mistakes or make some necessary tweaks based off of, responses or just going over it again and again. You should only stop submitting for the following reasons. You want to take a break because the rejections are getting to you. You know, you should know yourself and know when you've heard enough no's
Hmm.
and be like, it's time to take a break. Maybe it's time to rethink how I want to structure my manuscript, or it takes a lot to hear no over and over again. So there's nothing wrong with taking a break from it and then going back maybe a few months later.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And it's something that we've talked about a lot on this podcast is like you just need to know what your limits are. And if that
Hmm.
means taking a break, that's okay. If that means outsourcing some of the to-do items, that's okay too. But you really just have to listen to yourself or you're gonna get burnt out.
Yeah, exactly. And then another reason is you want to review your manuscript and query letter to see what isn't appealing to the agents. So, like I said before, review every time that you submit just to make sure that the next batch of submissions you're not sending the same mistakes, or you
Mhm.
could have made it a little bit better for the next time. So make sure that you're always going over it. It's never a finished product until you've basically sold it.
Yeah, just keep trying.
And then one last one, you've connected with an agent that wants to represent you and you want to sign with them, then you're done. So you can't be talking to another agent when you've already signed with one.
Mhm.
So getting rejected is hard and it takes a toll on you. Sometimes, especially when they say it's not a good fit or they don't really give an in-depth answer like we were just talking about. And then sometimes they give really good constructive criticism and it shapes you into a better writer and then forces you to look at your book in an agent's light, because us as creators don't know the marketing side of it,
Mhm.
don't know what it is to work with an editor and a publisher, and they have things that they need to look out for and make sure that they are submitting the perfect thing. Because even when they do submit something to an editor or to a publisher, they don't always get accepted, even when you have agent
Oh.
representation. So they really have to be 100% on board when they take you on and
Mhm.
have full faith in you and your work in order to pursue the next steps, because even it could take years for them to get the right publisher to say, okay, that we're going to do it, or it could take a week. So it really all depends.
Yeah. Have you found that in receiving some of this constructive criticism, have you like changed a lot of things, either about the book or how you like write your query letters, or what has the
Yeah.
process been?
Yeah, I actually had the privilege of meeting an agent at one of the conventions that I went to. And this is why I think that going to these conventions, even though it costs money, is really worth it, because I met an agent there. I did not sign with her, but she gave me really great advice and she went over my query letter and she gave me all sorts of tips on how to make it better. And if I didn't submit it to her, then I wouldn't have gotten all these critiques. Not everybody's going to do that for you. Like, she's an amazing person and just took the time to help me multiple times. So,
Oh,
yeah. So take whatever they're saying, unless it's like, this is complete and utter shit, like,
right.
don't take that. But if they're being like, you know what, I think that you should really nail down on your plot, or maybe this isn't coming through in your writing, or something like that, take it and like read over and keep that in mind, and see it from their perspective, because if you're going to sign with an agent, they're the one who's going to be your champion, and
Mhm.
they need to uh they need to believe in your work and make it as perfect as they can before getting it to somebody else.
Right.
I don't know if that answers your question, but I
Yeah,
hope it did.
it definitely does. Yeah,
Okay,
it
good.
sheds a good light on just like how networking with people within that industry can really like help shape you, especially when you're doing this for the first time.
Yeah. I actually met a few really cool people at one of the convention that I went to in Chicago. There was a lady there that had been published, I believe she said 10 times. And she was still going to these things. She was
Wow.
still wanting to learn. She was still wanting to connect. So I feel like, just, you may think it's a waste of time, or maybe everything, or maybe you have been published before, but honestly, the community with writers and published authors is really cool, especially because we're like putting ourselves out there,
Yeah.
and we're creatives and we're artists in a way. So
Yeah, for
we
sure.
can relate to each other.
Yeah, that's got to be so nice to, I mean, I feel like writing a book can, what it sounds like to me, could be like such a lonely thing because you're just in your head all day typing at your computer. And I'm sure it's just so nice to meet other people who are in the same boat as you, going through the same struggles, dealing with rejections, maybe dealing with writer's block. And I feel like that, like, you need people within your community for support.
Yeah. So the part of finding your people and having the support from them, because they know what it's like to be rejected
Yeah.
or have your work passed over hundreds of times. But when I'm writing, I definitely do not feel alone. I like
Um,
want to be left alone, and I'm really activated
mhm,
creatively. So I think that if you have the juices flowing, make sure you sit down and release it all, because I've had times where I'm like forcing myself to sit down and I'm
mhm,
definitely not as creative in that moment. But when I can feel, like, oh, this would be really great if I added this to the book, or oh, this conversation with the characters is something that is missing. I need to go
mhm.
like run to the book. Like, take that time to actually go and work on it, because those are like little sparks of energy that you need for it.
Right. Hmm.
So, also, this line of work is very subjective. It really comes down to the agent's taste and what they are specifically looking for, and time. Really, it's all about timing. So what you need on your side is a polished product, perfect timing, and a shit ton of research on agents on your side. So don't just submit willy nilly. Make sure that they are actually looking for erotica, or memoirs, or historical whatevers. Just because they're going to be irritated that you've wasted their time. That's just a rejection that you don't need, and
Hmm.
that's kind of wasting their time at the end of the day. So really make sure that you know who you're submitting your manuscript to. And if you get rejected, as I mentioned before, it is totally normal, and in fact, it feels kind of like a badge of honor that any writer holds, because it means that it it means and it represents that you're putting yourself out there, and the barrier to entry is very high. And the fact that you are out there grinding away, submitting your work every week is an amazing and magical thing. So don't let the rejections get you down. Keep going because someone will like your work. It just may take time to get to the right person.
Yeah, that's such a good outlook to have because it sounds like such a tough process. And I can just tell how like excited and energized and passionate you are about this. And I know it's just going to be a matter of time before someone picks you up.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, definitely keep us updated as we continue talking about this process that you've been going through.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you guys for listening to this episode. I know that I ranted a lot. I'm just really excited, as Lexi mentioned. I am going to touch base on the don'ts on writing for next week. And this is going to be good for anybody that does like professional writing or creative writing or any type of writing, just to make sure you steer clear of the don'ts that you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that because this is a whole world that I am not familiar with. So
Right.
yeah, thank you, Mims, for bringing us all of these like really amazing tips. I feel like this is so helpful for people who have never been through this process before and are interested in writing a manuscript. So thank you. I'm sure our listeners appreciate that too. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next Monday.
Bye.
Bye. Passive Aggressive Income was written, recorded, edited, and produced by co-hosts and creators Mims and Lexi. We truly want to thank our listeners, collaborators, friends, and family that continuously support us for all the love we receive. If you enjoy our show, please give us a glowing rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram to see what we are up to. For any inquiries, please email passiveaggressiveincome2023@gmail.com. Episodes of Passive Aggressive Income are available wherever you listen to podcasts, so make sure to subscribe and like us on your favorite streaming platform.